Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we will be looking at AQA Alevel Psychology 2021 Paper 1 Exemplar Answers for Social Influence, which you need to know for AQA Alevel Psychology. I hope you enjoy this video and find it helpful. Let's get started. Please note that these answers have been produced with knowledge of the mark scheme but have not been approved by the mark scheme themselves. There are 3 assessment objectives, AOs, in psychology. In this video they are color-coded. AO1 Knowledge, purple. AO2 Application, blue. AO3 Evaluation, red and green. Question 1. Describe how Zimbardo investigated conformity to social roles. 4 marks. Zimbardo conducted an overt, participant-controlled observational study. Zimbardo, and his colleagues, Haney et al., 1973, set up a mock prison in the basement of the psychology department at Stanford University. 24 U.S. male college student volunteers in response to a newspaper advert were selected from a larger sample pool of 75 volunteers after extensive psychological and physical screening and testing to ensure they were emotionally stable and healthy and had no criminal tendencies. They were paid $15 a day to take part. Participants were then randomly allocated to either the role of guard or prisoner. The participants allocated to prisoners were unexpectedly arrested at their home by real local police, delivered to the prison blindfolded. On arrival they were fingerprinted, deloused, stripped, given a prison uniforms, had chains placed around their ankles and assigned an ID number. They were allowed certain rights such as 3 meals per day, 3 supervised visits to the toilet and 2 visit slots per week. The participants allocated to guards wore khaki uniforms, reflective sunglasses, preventing eye contact, issued handcuffs, truncheons, and keys. They only referred to the prisoners by their assigned ID numbers throughout the experiment and were instructed to run the prison without using physical violence. Each cell was allocated 3 prisoners and the prisoners' daily routines were heavily regulated. There were 16 rules to follow, enforced by guards working in shifts, 3 at a time. Zimbardo took the role of the prison superintendent. The study was originally planned to last 2 weeks. Fewer and fewer people use single-use plastic items, such as water bottles and plastic straws. Question 2. Using your knowledge of social influence processes in social change, explain why fewer and fewer people are using single-use plastic items. 6 marks. Social change occurs when whole societies, not just individuals, change and adopt new attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors through minority influence processes, e.g. when a minority view challenges a majority view and is eventually accepted as the majority. In the past, not as much was known about the harmful effects that single-use plastics can have on the environment, and therefore the group norm was to use single-use plastics as it was seen as convenient and easy. This meant that young people would be influenced by normative social influence to use single-use plastics or risk social rejection from the group, which eventually led to informational social influence, as people wanted to be right. However, as time went on, a minority of individuals began to understand the harmful effects that single-use plastics was having on the environment and used minority influence processes to enact social change. The minority were successfully able to stay consistent and not deviate from their message that single-use plastics were dangerous to the environment despite social pressures. The minority would have been able to form environmental activist pressure groups to help gain support and form communities with people who had the same beliefs. This would have shown the majority that this viewpoint was something the minority truly believed in and had believed in for a long period of time. The minority were able to show commitment, augmentation principle, by putting themselves at risk or inconvenience and show that they were willing to make personal sacrifices to the cause in order to get their message across to others. This would have helped the minority to convince the majority to listen to the message and drawn more attention to the cause. This would have been done through a variety of methods such as protests, marches, strikes, lobbying, boycotting, and campaigns. The minority would have also volunteered their time to educate people on the harmful effects that single-use plastics could have on the environment, highlighting how they truly believed in their message. The minority would have shown a degree of flexibility and would have been willing to adapt and listen to valid and reasonable counterarguments. Instead, the minority would have compromised by asking people to cut back on single-use plastics, using recycle items instead, or asking people to only use single-use plastic at certain times. This would have made the majority listen and take the message seriously and would have made the minority seem less rigid and dogmatic. Over time, the majority would have started to internalize this message. This would have acted as a snowball effect, slowly and gradually gathering momentum and members until there becomes a tipping point and the minority becomes the majority and uses the social pressure of normative social influence, such as young people today who are more concerned with the environment and frown on peers who cause harm to the environment. This then would have resulted in social crypto-amnesia, where people are aware change occurred but forget the origins of the original viewpoint, mostly likely because the individual had held negative views of the belief which they have now adopted. Instead of identifying with the minority group, individuals will dissociate the minority views from the people who promoted them. People of today have a memory that it was previously socially acceptable to use single-use plastics, however they are unaware of where this view changed, mostly likely because they used single-use plastics at some point in their lives and thought that it was convenient and easy. As time moved on, using reusable items started to become a social norm. More and more people started to conform with this viewpoint to avoid the risk of social rejection and fit in. People started to believe and agree that single-use plastics were dangerous for the environment, with those who chose to use single-use plastics facing the risk of social rejection, as their behavior violated social norms. Eventually, this led to informational social influence, where people finally internalized the beliefs of the minority as a result of wanting to be right. As time moved on, more people know about the harmful and dangerous effects that single-use plastic can have on the environment. People have become convinced by evidence, research, data, and statistics, and therefore their views and opinions changed. Over time, dictators, government lawmakers, through power and authority, have created and changed laws and rules on single-use plastic items, e.g. plastic bags now cost money in shops. This made using reusable items more of a social norm and led to groups of people changing their behavior and beliefs because of the fear of punishment and consequences of not obeying. A researcher wanted to investigate whether there was a relationship between locus of control and resistance to social influence. Before the investigation began, he devised a questionnaire to measure locus of control. Question 3. Why would the researcher's questionnaire produce primary data? Suggest one limitation of primary data. 2 marks. The researcher's questionnaire produces primary data because it is original data obtained and collected directly first-hand from the participants or source by the researcher themselves, specifically for the purpose of the investigation being carried out, without relying on previously collected data. A limitation of primary data is that it is time-consuming. The process of designing, collecting, and analyzing primary data can take a considerable amount of time. This can delay research outcomes, especially if the data collection involves large sample sizes or complex methodologies. To assess the questionnaires' validity, the researcher gave it to 30 participants and recorded the results. He then gave the same 30 participants an established questionnaire measuring locus of control. The researcher found a weak positive correlation between the two sets of results, suggesting that his questionnaire had low validity. Question 4. Explain how the validity of the researcher's questionnaire could be improved. 4 marks. The validity of the researcher's questionnaire could be improved by avoiding leading questions. Frame questions neutrally to avoid influencing respondents' answers. Leading questions can bias the results and compromise validity. The validity of the researcher's questionnaire could be improved by including open-ended questions. Adding open-ended questions allows respondents to express their thoughts in their own words, providing richer data and insights. Question 5. Discuss legitimacy of authority as an explanation for obedience. 8 marks. Legitimacy of authority is an explanation of obedience. which suggests that people are socialized from an early age, initially by parents and then teachers later on, to accept that a hierarchy of power exists within society and recognize their own and others' positions in this social hierarchy system, with authority figures having power in social situations because people are taught to trust them or because they have the power to punish them. For example, the police have power in regards to the law, doctors have power in regards to health and medicine, parents have power in regards to upbringing, well-being, discipline, values, and morals, and teachers have power in regards to education. The authority they have is legitimate in the sense that it is agreed upon by society, and this is accepted as it allows society to function smoothly. Milgram believed that there was generally a shared expectation that most situations would have an appropriate authority figure controlling the situation. Therefore, the person giving the orders must be perceived to have the social power to give orders within the context of what is happening for them to be seen as a legitimate authority figure. However, a consequence of legitimacy of authority is that some people are granted the power to punish others, e.g., it is accepted that the police and courts have power to punish wrongdoers. Problems arise when legitimate authority becomes destructive. History has too often shown that charismatic and powerful leaders can use their legitimate powers for destructive purposes, ordering people to behave in ways that are callous, cruel, stupid, and dangerous. Destructive authority was very clearly shown in Milgram's study, when the experimenter used prods to order participants to behave in ways that went against their consciences. A strength of legitimacy of authority as an explanation of obedience is that it can explain cultural differences in obedience. Different people in different countries obey authority figures in different ways. Only 16% of Australians went to top voltage, Kilham and Mann 1874, and 85% of German participants went to top voltage, Mantell 1971. Authority is more likely to be accepted as legitimate in some cultures. This is a strength because it suggests that a person's view of the legitimacy of authority is taught in childhood, and different societies are structured and children raised to perceive authority figures in different ways. A limitation of legitimacy of authority as an explanation of obedience is that it does not explain all disobedience. Legitimacy of authority does not explain obedience, or lack of, in a hierarchy in which legitimacy of authority is widely accepted. Rank and Jacobson's nurse study showed differences in obedience in nurses all working together under the same doctor. This is a limitation because it suggests that the presence of authority alone may not always guarantee uniform obedience or compliance within a hierarchical structure. The variations in obedience levels observed in the nurse study conducted by Rank and Jacobson emphasize that factors beyond just the legitimacy of authority play a role in determining individual responses to authority figures. This complexity underscores the need to consider individual differences and group dynamics in understanding obedience within organizational hierarchies. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Bye.